and welcome to another majestic filled episode of Movie Master Reviews on YouTube. Today's movie is the sequel to The Lion King, The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. Now, for those who are unaware, in the mid to late 90s, Disney started making these direct-to-DVD sequels, and they continued well into the 2000s, but when John Lasseter took over Walt Disney Animation Studios, he also reconstructed Disney Toon Studios, which and however these sequels were not, they were made by Disney, but were not animated by them in-house. They were subcontracted out to one of their studio outlets. This was part of the new Lion King expanded universe that got tossed out after Timon and Pumbaa, so beside the point. These direct-to-DVD sequels would either be pilots for potential TV series. As a matter of fact, most, if not all, most of them were actually pilots for a TV show that were edited together and then released on home video. But very few of them were actual, and the ones that were actually movies were presented as broad strokes midquels that had happened in a time gap between the main events of the movie. The Lion King 2 is actually one of those where it actually attempted to tell an actual story. It's set after the end of the first film with the newborn cub at the end of the movie, and the cub's name is now Kiara, who's being trained by her father Simba to become queen. Except, once you know it, Kiara doesn't want to be queen, and it turns out she befriends an outsider named Kovu, who later, as an adult, infiltrates the Pride. Well, what it happens is, there's a group of traitorous lions who were banished by Simba because actually they liked Scar's rule a little bit better, and they felt that Simba had no legitimate claim to the throne. So they conspired to kill Simba and retake what they believe is the rightful throne. So, the story, since The Lion King took a lot of inspiration from Hamlet, you actually could make the argument that this story is actually Romeo and Juliet, but with lions and a happy ending. Yeah. This is sort of actually kind of true, and the story itself is actually pretty cliche. You have the daughter who doesn't really get along with the father, befriends an outsider. The father tries to forbid them from seeing each other, but they see each other, and eventually, just as the father comes around and is about to accept them, a misunderstanding occurs where the father believes the outsider betrayed them, and it's the typical misunderstanding plot. But what's different is he never realizes that he was innocent. The whole movie, and it's almost like and Simba's already some kind of a douche in this, but the fact that they kind of pull a Pocahontas and they never really have him acknowledge that he was wrong for exiling him or something, and it's like, okay, but again, like I said, the genetic story, the characters, and this is one of the most points of contention for the sequel is particularly the characterization of Simba. And like I said before, his character really falls into the generic anti-hero father, where he doesn't listen to reason, and the only times he will listen is if it counterpoints to him. And a lot of people were actually saying that a lot of the stuff that Simba says and does actually makes sense when you look at the film from his POV. And it does, but again, we're seeing the movie from Kiara's point of view. So we're meant to see him in a little bit more negative way. And Kiara herself is not a bad character per se. It's just she doesn't really have this depth to her. And Kovu himself, and some of the new characters like Kovu Zero, who replaces Scar as the villain, when they're okay, but there really isn't that much of... Zero especially is one of those where it's like there really isn't that lack of motivation to her, and I think it's because these really aren't characters we saw in the first movie, and unlike most of these direct-to-DVD sequels, which were just cash grabs, Disney actually said that they were planning a sequel to this not long after the first film. But since these are characters we haven't really got time to get to know, particularly the new folks, we're left with a lot of depth. Not a lot of depth. Kovu actually had more depth than the rest. But aside from that, Lion King 2, again, is not one of those it's not bad. But it just really has, like, a little bit, again, like I said, a generic storyline, and new characters that you can't really get into because the first film made no attempt to kind of introduce them. It's like old characters that don't really get to do much. One becomes the stereotypical anti-hero father, an outsider who's more depth. But aside from that, again, like I said, we have this on VHS when it originally first came out, and again, it was alright, but watching them back to back, you can kind of see broad stroking here and there. But aside from that, it's a good little kiddie flick. Aside from the generic kiss plot and some lack of character depth. So that was The Lion King 2. Check the channel for my more previous stuff. And the next review will be the final installment of the Lion King trilogy, The Lion King 1.5. So this movie, Matt, signing off.